All right, welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by Jehovah's Witnesses that they are living in a modern-day spiritual paradise. I am your host, Stacy Bauman, former elder, ministerial servant, most importantly, a kid raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses throughout the 70s and 80s. I always give a warning. We try to have some fun here. We try to heal. We tackle sensitive subjects, serious subjects, absurd subjects, but the sarcasm, humor, observations, and all that good stuff is nothing more than the host, mine. Never meant to offend, so please note that. We're hoping that in some small way this is at least entertaining or educational. Take a walk with me this week through paradise. I'm going to share a little fact about me personally. I love books. I love the way a book feels in my hand. I love the way they smell. If I had the choice of holding a book and reading or reading it on a screen, it's not much of a decision for me. I guess that makes me old school. I love the way a book feels in your hand. I love books and I love reading. And at times I realize that probably makes me officially old, or at least old school. But when I was a kid, one of my favorite places to hang out, particularly in junior high school, was the library. I'm that guy. I love books, and I love the way a library feels. I still get all excited when I enter a library or even a bookstore, which is becoming pretty rare anymore. And literally, I could spend hours there. At times, it's almost emotionally overwhelming because there's so many things that I want to pick up and read. But man, do I love it. Absolutely love it. And reading books, libraries, all of that good stuff just feels right to me. And sure, this probably all goes back to how we're all raised, particularly so in my case, or what we were exposed to as kids when it came to reading and books. I love watching a young person's face when you even bring up the Dewey Decimal System or try to explain the joy that came from opening the file drawer in a library to look for that book you wanted. That whole piece of the journey, dynamic, digging in, trying to find something that you really wanted to read, that you had an interest in. And then, of course, the whole walk through the library to the shelf, seeking out this book like it was buried treasure. I mean, good grief, I just get happy talking about it. So I guess I've exposed myself on all things books and libraries. I'm not looking to insult younger generations here. But frankly, despite all these old school archaic methods, it was all easier then. When I was a kid, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones. I know, I can hear people gasping in shock. We weren't looking for 10-second sound bites. We were looking for immersion. Immersion. We could go anywhere or learn about anything with a book. It's cliche, but I could disappear for hours inside a book in my own head, as is probably not hard to see if you listen to the show at all. I'm sure no one's going to remember these books, but as a little guy, I read every book in the Alfred Hitchcock Three Investigators series by 5th grade. In 6th grade, I won the Reading Award for reading 100 books in a matter of months, and I still have that pin. Very proud of it. But from there, I graduated to books like 1984 by George Orwell, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, book burning, you remember that one. Watership Down, who remembers that, by Richard Adams, with, an occasional break to read Mad Magazine by Alfred E. Newman. There's the 70s reference, gone. I owe my love of books and reading and all things library and everything that comes with it to my mother. I have to say, I am forever grateful to my mother for reading to me while I was a baby, and for continuing to encourage reading throughout my childhood. She herself was a little bit of a reader. I definitely took to it fast because of her influence and her taking the time. It was reading to me and with me as a little guy that created my love for it. Still, one of the greatest gifts a person can give me to this day is a book. I love books. I guess I'm a simple guy. I don't need the flat screen TV. I'd rather have a great book. Sometimes I just hold one and I feel better. Maybe I need to be talking to a therapist right now, in reality. But just holding a book feels good and makes me feel better. True story. We won't get into the psychology of all of this. I still have a problem concentrating if there is an option to read something. Don't put something in front of me. And this all started, and there's got to be at least a few people who have this experience with cereal boxes on Saturday mornings. And it continues today. If there's something in print sitting in front of me, I'm going to be distracted and want to read it. Am I alone on this one? Where's my book lovers? I love books. So naturally, my love for books and reading followed me throughout my life as a Jehovah's Witness. And eventually, oddly enough, ironically enough, it was that love that led me by the hand straight out the exit door of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, you think that's a bit of a paradox. I love books. As we will see, they have plenty of them. But it was the fact that they had so many books and such an extensive library that left me puzzled. Anyone who listens to this crazy show knows that my first line of encouragement for anyone questioning this organization is to actually read. For a Jehovah's Witness on the fence or doubting, ask yourself a basic question. Have I actually read the Bible? We'll start there. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses claims that the Bible is a letter written to them by the hand of Jehovah himself. Just 9 guys in upstate New York. We'll get into it. And that's odd considering its far and wide distribution on this planet. But out of the corner of their mouth, they claim we all should make it a habit to read the Bible daily. It used to be on a sign there in Brooklyn. That the rest of us can benefit from this book that was written specifically for them. Thanks, guys. Hundreds of thousands have died to get this book to 2023, and Jehovah's Witnesses live with a few great ironies when it comes to reading, particularly, and we'll start there, the Bible. First, as I alluded to, it's a letter from Jehovah to only them. That's right. 9 guys in upstate New York, but the rest of us, by being their friends, benefit from reading it too, only to confirm it's all written about them. That's right. I estimate 95% of Jehovah's Witnesses have never even read it. Irony number 2. When you consider Jehovah's written you a letter for salvation and for life, and you've never even cracked the book by middle age, you might want to question why you're a Jehovah's Witness, subject for another day. And then a third irony to me, despite Jehovah's Witnesses claiming that their entire existence is based on the Bible, and the claim that the Bible is all about them, particularly the anointed or the 9 guys in upstate New York, the Bible itself literally has nothing, and I mean nothing, to do with them. It becomes obvious once you actually read it. But that's a subject for another day. Nevertheless, jumping backwards here, I always encourage a preemie or someone on the fence or a doubter to start here. Read. Read the Bible. Hold it in your hand. I always ask them, have you read the Bible? Only the Bible, not the Watchtowers. We'll get into this. Just a cover-to-cover read of the Bible, the book Jehovah wrote. And you'd be surprised at the answer. And I'll issue a warning for those that decide to do it. Be mentally and emotionally prepared to see and feel things you never felt or saw before, despite owning the book. To discover things that have been there the entire time, to feel the weight of questions regarding Jehovah's Witnesses that you never knew were so heavy. to feel sick, to feel sad, to have questions. It's their book. There's nothing apostate about it. No one else wrote it. It's theirs. Start with the Bible. If necessary, read it twice. No watchtowers, no books. You. Bible. Alone. There's my first encouragement. I have to use the Magic Book, that I personally have read 7 times, as a jumping off point to discuss something I always struggled with and should bother every Jehovah's Witness in moments where they can think. And in this subject, it was a major factor in waking myself up, despite years of ignoring it. We are all so different, and it's different things that cause us to cut through the decades of propaganda and cognitive dissonance that the God Squad is so adept at pushing on us week after week after year after decade. For me, my love for books and reading was one of those things. As a reader and book lover, I had my own Bible with my name, you remember this, proudly stamped on the bottom in the corner. It was a gift, folks. I loved holding it. I loved reading it. All of it. And because I did, I couldn't escape something that proves Jehovah's Witnesses are a man-made organization. I'm going to say that again. Because I actually read the Bible, I couldn't escape something that proves Jehovah's Witnesses are a man-made organization. Let's take a look. From the pages of Jehovah's personal letter to mankind, I present to you a couple of verses that takes this organization and exposes it for what it really is. And I guarantee if you've been a witness for any amount of time, you've heard these verses read from the stage, conventions, and more. 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, using the New World Translation, their heavily doctored Bible, says this, quote, "All Scripture is inspired of God and beneficial for teaching, for reproving, for setting things straight, for disciplining in righteousness, so that the man of God may be fully competent, completely equipped for every good work." End quote. From the one and only book we are assured was written under Jehovah's personal direction, we are told a concrete fact. This is the one and only book you will ever need. The Bible, one and only, from Jehovah's lips to our ears. For a Jehovah's Witness, these words from Jehovah's finger in his own book create an undeniable problem, a huge problem, a problem so big that if accepted at face value, single-handedly ends the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses as being directed by the Creator. It's over. Game over. What's the problem, you ask? I could ramble off a dozen questions right now. But let's keep it fairly simple for anyone truly considering some of this for the very first time. If this one book makes the man of God fully competent, completely equipped for every good work in life, why did Jehovah and his Son create the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society? Why? That's right. It's staring you in the face the entire time you're a Jehovah's Witness. If you feel a little queasy with that very, very simple question in reality, you're not alone. Once it hits you, you can't unsee it. Despite the creator of all things and the author of the greatest book and instruction manual ever written, we are to believe that Jehovah and his Son Jesus, now King of Jehovah's Witnesses, and might I add, also known as the Great Teacher, didn't really know how to write a book or communicate with all of mankind. Let that sink in. No, they needed a publishing company. And well, a handful, a few more books and magazines, if they were to truly save mankind from a destruction they themselves also decided the earth needed. Yeah, it can give you a headache. If you're not following, or that dull ache of cognitive dissonance is kicking in, let me now make it feel worse. Consider the scale by which they've taken Jehovah's perfect book, his letter to us, the Bible, its words at 2 Timothy 3 that I just read, and well, completely ignored them while simultaneously casting all kinds of doubt on Jehovah, the author himself. Does he forget stuff? Is he a bad communicator? Why does Jehovah need Bible study aids when he wrote it himself and sent his son, the great teacher, to be sure we are all understanding his book and teachings? Was he kidding when he said this one book would leave us all completely equipped? Was he just kidding? Did he really need 9 guys and a publishing company in New York to, clarify a few things from the Creator? I present to you from the frequently asked questions section on his website, under the subheading Cooperating Legal Entities, a absolutely mind-blowing fact. Quote, besides the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, Jehovah's Witnesses use dozens of legal entities in various countries. Some of these entities include in their names such terms as Watchtower, or a translation of one of these. These various legal entities have enabled us to accomplish much since they were established. Keep in mind 2 Timothy 3:16. We are completely equipped. Jehovah's words, not a man's. Keep it in mind as I read the following. Back to the quote. Subsection Writing and Publishing says this. We have published some 220 million Bibles and about 40 billion pieces of Bible-based literature. Our publications are available in over 900 languages. The jw.org website allows people to read the Bible online, forget that feeling of a book, without cost in more than 160 languages, and to get answers to such Bible questions as, what is the kingdom of God? End quote. An answer found in the Bible. Never mind. Wait, what? I need to pause and take a deep breath here, because this is truly astounding. I need to clarify this with the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. Nothing says, who cares what Jehovah says, like claiming you need to produce 40 billion pieces of Bible-based literature to explain the book Jehovah wrote better than he did. Jehovah's Witnesses are taught by the governing body that despite the Creator, the Almighty, Jehovah himself, creating everything we can see, breathe, see, touch, experience, and that he is the personification of love and perfection, that despite Jehovah deciding a book was the best way to tell people about him, his plans, and how to live forever here, and despite sending his own son, Jesus, the great teacher, to earth to speak to us, he still needs a rotating group of old guys living in upstate New York in the United States, not Israel, to speak for him. And the proof is right there. 40 billion pieces of literature to explain a book we are told by Jehovah is perfect and is all we need. 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. The fact is this. someone isn't telling the truth here. Somebody isn't telling the truth. And it begs a few questions. What does fully competent, completely equipped mean to you? Why didn't Jehovah mention the books that would follow? You know, illustrious, powerful, hard-hitting books like the Youth Book, or Revelation Climax, or how about the Isaiah books and the Daniel books? Why? At 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17 are we told we're completely equipped for life with the book in our hand, but Jehovah neglected to say, I'm a little weak sauce on how I communicate. I'm gonna make 40 billion more. What was going on with Jehovah and communicating with all mankind between the 1st century and the late 1800s of the 19th century when that Bible he made just wasn't enough for the rest of us? Where in the world would we be if Chuck Russell hadn't started publishing literature? But the questions continue, at least for me, and they did for me. Do I really need to read the Bible, or can I just skip ahead to the updates via books and magazines coming out from the Watchtower Society? After all, it looks like that whole completely equipped, fully competent comment was, well, not really true. We're not really equipped. When Jehovah said that, yeah, he left out a few details. And finally, from the chamber of my deep thoughts, the vault, so to speak, you always get a weird one with me on the show. I couldn't help but think, as all of this began to become clear to me, the Bible, 40 billion more books, Jehovah said the opposite. I couldn't help but think, did the Apostle Paul arrive in heaven and get his butt kicked for writing 2 Timothy 3, since it's clearly not true? Did he mess it up? Was there a local needs part in heaven about going beyond what is written? I mean, is Paul embarrassed? Does he get less fireballs to throw at Armageddon? Because, man, he blew it. He blew it when he wrote that verse. He said we would be completely equipped. But he didn't mention that there would be a follow-up of 40 billion sequels to the Bible. And therefore, a publishing company. I mean, folks, dear listener, we have a multi-billion-dollar publishing company that claims to speak for God. And well, God said he already had the last word. It's called the Bible. Something is off here. And I make fun, and I'm going to poke a lot of fun today, because the level of absurdity on this particular subject breaks the meter. We have the creator of all things establishing this book is all you need. We've got some guys showing up in the late 19th century and growing through the 20th and 21st saying, well, Jehovah, yeah, he bumped his head that day. We've created 40 billion pieces of literature that better explain what God said. This should be enough. All of this should be enough for someone to sit back and reflect. But it doesn't even begin to capture that the Bible says this in many places. This book's all you need. And I'll give you another one that I've brought out in other episodes. It's a rather slightly, important message right at the end of the Bible in Revelation 22:18 and 19. And it looks like Jehovah and Jesus wanted to once again be clear that any additions to the Bible, much less 40 billion additions, were going to be met with plagues, and then some. But look, they surely didn't mean 40 billion more additions, right? Right? It's right there. The Bible is either a book inspired by God, or it's not. But as a Jehovah's Witness will often do, they will pretend they don't see any of this. And listen, I'm speaking out of compassion and empathy. I've been there. Many folks who might take the time to listen to this crazy ramble weekly have been there. We know. You want to look away. They pretend to not see this. We have over 40 billion pieces of literature that Jehovah in his Bible says we don't need. But wait a minute, wait. I think I may have found the reason Jehovah needed a publishing company and 40 billion pieces of other books, magazines, and whatnot to explain himself, the guy who made everything. Jehovah's Witnesses are taught and believe this. Here might be a reason. From the United in Worship book, you remember the Blue Bomber, page 111, it said this, quote, special attention was being given to making up the government that would rule mankind for 1,000 years, and nearly all the inspired letters in the Christian Greek scriptures are primarily directed to this group of kingdom heirs, the holy ones, partakers of the heavenly calling, end quote. This is emphasized over and over again. The Watchtower of 2008, January 15th, page 22, no irony, one of the 40 billion pieces of literature, says this, quote, the Hebrew scriptures were written in the first place for the fleshly nation of Israel during the time that they had a special relationship with God. Odd, fleshly Israel never had a copy of the Bible. It continues, the Christian Greek scriptures were written primarily for the Israel of God, those anointed as brothers of Christ and spiritual sons of God. Of course, that in no way suggests that non-Israelites could not derive great benefit from studying the Hebrew scriptures. Similarly, Christians who are not anointed with Holy Spirit derive immeasurable benefits from studying and living according to the counsel found in the Christian Greek scriptures. End quote. And there it is. Here's my theory, or one of many reasons, why we need 40 billion pieces of literature outside of the perfect one. The Bible, as we are told by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, was only written for the guys in New York anyway. Therefore, a Jehovah's Witness might come to the conclusion that Jehovah needed to make more books because he didn't explain the fact well enough, or they wouldn't understand what he was saying at all in the Christian Greek scriptures because, well, their future included a monkey, a vegetarian bowl, and a whole lot of sunsets. They were lowly earth people. Only those going to heaven were, quote, completely equipped by reading the Bible, because the Bible is only for them. And they would then go on to produce 40 billion pieces of literature for the rest of us dum-dums who are just going to live on a paradise earth. You can't unsee it. It's their words. You got a Bible. I like holding it in my hand. You got one of their publications. I like holding it in my hand. One says this, the other says that. But before you buy into that program as well, there's a problem. There's a problem with this whole theory about the Bible being written for them. If the Bible was only for anointed people, and Jehovah forgot to explain that it was only made for people going to heaven to be fully competent, why do the rest of us have to read it at all? Why do we have to read it at all? And you'll actually see that in action as a witness. Everyone else spends a lot more time reading one of 40 billion pieces of literature. Why do the rest of us who just want to live on earth, hang around in a hammock, and eat a lettuce wrap have to read this at all? Can't we just skip it like we do eating the dry crackers and drinking the wine at the memorial celebration every year? We got lots of other books, magazines, and tracts that we can fully comprehend, apparently. Is this why Jesus never mentions living forever on a paradise earth, by the way? Because the Bible wasn't for the rest of us anyway, so he arranged for a publishing company to start sharing that paradise hope thing in 1935. He felt that printing lots of books and magazines was a better way to tell the universe about a paradise Earth that would affect billions than, well, I don't know, just saying it himself during his 3.5 years of preaching while here on planet Earth, or recording it in his dad's book, the Bible. No, he needed a publishing company to get that message across. It's uncomfortable, and you can't unsee it. Just pull the string and watch everything about Jehovah's Witnesses unravel on a simplified subject such as this. And I could keep going, but you get the picture. Whether you're a Jehovah's Witness or someone that has left the organization or are only here out of curiosity, keep the following couple of facts in mind. Jehovah says his Bible was perfect. He wrote it. He inspired people to write it. And the only book you need to know him, the Creator, and as we're told, live forever, either in heaven or on earth. But the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses says, no, that's not true. Jehovah is wrong. Jehovah made a mistake. He needed an additional set of books and magazines that he didn't write, we did, to explain what he meant. In fact, here's 40 billion pieces to choose from. Facts. Facts. So where does this leave us? With a publishing company pumping out billions of books and magazines, all of which proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that something is wrong. Something is terribly wrong. I'll go deeper on the Bible itself at another time. It should be a series. So let's put God's book on the shelf now. Let's focus instead on some of the details surrounding all of these other books, magazines, tracts, and more. As always, what follows now is my own brand of questions, observations, thoughts, and emotions that I've personally had as I exited, and why I used them and thought about them to exit over many, many years. I'm going to start with one that, as I said at the outset, is a paradox for me. It's a paradox in reality with my personality. I love books. I love the library. I love looking for books. I love the whole process. It's like finding buried treasure to me. But I ask you something, and I had to ask myself this question. The question is this: are books and magazines effective for saving lives? Is that the best form of communication when you're trying to save someone from being killed by Stephen Lett? Unfortunately, I can't wow you with statistics on the effectiveness of the book carts or the books on those book carts. However, if you'd like, you could visit a local park or a train station. Just this morning, my sister texted me that she ran into him at a rest stop. Or you can reference last week's episode where I ran into those book carts at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And you'll get a small snapshot of just how effective a book is at saving lives. And if that doesn't work, feel free to visit a local laundromat. You got them. We have them in the U.S. here. Laundromats, where you will, without a doubt, find a stack of watchtowers left by a desperate pioneer needing placement numbers, because when you're washing your underwear, you have a strong spiritual need. And wouldn't you know it, there is a free Watchtower Awake in that laundromat. What are the chances? Who can forget, and I know I'm not alone on this, early morning service and dumping publications at laundromats and bus stops, following Jesus' example? After all, he did that. I'm going to leave yet another watchtower covered in lint at this laundromat. Someone will find it. This is an effective way to save lives. And look, I'm going to go sideways for a few minutes. I at least warn you. In a lot of ways, the show is me just dumping what's in my head. And when I meditate on this, I tried to think back to an all-time favorite story, and I'm sorry in advance. It's not Adam and Eve. Nope, it's back to the other one, Noah and the flood. Let's be honest. Noah really bombed as a preacher. He bombed. You thought you were bad as a Jehovah's Witness publisher. No Bible studies, no return visits. Noah bombed. For 40 years, he unexplainably not only had time to build a gigantic ark and travel the planet, catching, feeding, and keeping alive every species of animal. I just can't. But Jehovah's Witnesses are taught that he also had time to preach. In fact, it was by far and away his most important work or job. Incidentally, apparently Jehovah knew Noah was going to be a great zoologist and ark builder, but was going to bomb as a publisher because he gave him ark dimensions prior to Noah ever knocking on a door. I wonder how Jehovah knew his dimensions would only need to be big enough for 8 people and some animals. Odd. It's an odd question, is it not? Dimensions before he's ever preached? How did he know? Why didn't Jehovah give him dimensions to save thousands of people? Just in case, Noah was a good publisher. Things that create a lot of questions. Pay no attention to the details. Animals, water, and stuff. That's what we need to watch. But forget that. I'm trying to make a point in my own bizarre way. Was I the only one that felt like Jehovah set Noah up to fail? Did you notice something? Noah was supposed to save mankind as a publisher, a preacher. In his spare time. But he was supposed to do all of it without even a Bible. And dare I say it, he was supposed to do all of that without any literature from the Watchtower Bible Tract Society. Not a single book or magazine. How did Noah manage? I mean, no wonder he bombed out as a preacher, right? Oh, wait a minute. I just had another thought. No, I didn't. I've had it many years ago. Jesus didn't have a Bible or literature either. I always wanted to be there when they rolled out books and magazines to Noah in paradise. I often wondered if he would be pissed off when Jehovah's Witnesses told them they drove around in cars. They dumped publication after publication into laundromats, bus stops, and more. They had book carts they just stood next to. Then headed to a coffee shop because they were exhausted after an hour of doing this, but then went out for one more return visit to dump off another set of magazines. I picture Noah losing it in paradise and screaming, "What?" I didn't have any books or magazines to leave. And I was, by the way, wrestling with an elephant on a leash while I was trying to talk to people. No wonder they didn't listen to me. And by the way, what's a coffee break? I walked back from Africa on foot with cats. I'm sorry. I hope you at least find this. What? It sounds absurd, and it's absurd. But it's also legitimate, especially for a modern-day Jehovah's Witness. A publishing company pumping out $40 billion, basically creating a dynamic around the Bible that makes it null and void. But in all seriousness, of all the communication Jehovah and Jesus could come up with to mankind, they landed on printing presses, publishing books and magazines? That sounded better to them than appearing in the clouds and addressing the planet with a booming voice? What about chaining together some lightning in the sky to spell out, Jehovah's Witnesses are my guys? Or what the hell, Jehovah allowed for talking animals in the past. Why not have a talking gorilla or lion show up and get our attention? But no. Books, magazines, and tracts. That's what Jehovah landed on, after already admitting his first book wasn't good enough. And look, I know, this from a guy that likes reading. Yeah, I should be thrilled about all these books and magazines. It doesn't make sense as a communication tool. And here's a little fact to consider as well. According to UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, there are 781 million illiterate adults on this planet. Can't read. Am I the only one, or are there others that are concerned that they may miss out on this month's Watchtower? How about another stat on saving lives with books and magazines? Are you ready? From the Watchtower of 2012, August 15th, page 3, I Am With You is the article. We get this, quote, "The Watchtower is now published in 195 languages. I believe that's gone up. It is the most widely circulated magazine on Earth with a circulation of 42,182,000 copies for each issue. In second place, because we're ranking now, is its companion magazine, The Awake, with a circulation of 41,042,084 languages. I guess The Awake is less important to Jehovah and Jesus? Less publication, less languages. Back to the quote, additionally, additionally, about 100 million books and Bibles are printed each year. Impressive numbers. But again, 42 million Watchtowers each issue, 781 million illiterate precious souls on planet Earth right now. Those numbers create a stomachache when compared to Jesus' words that Jehovah has the hairs of our heads numbered, but apparently isn't concerned that he only pumps out 42 million copies of the Watchtower on a planet that features 8 billion people, and almost 10% of those 8 billion people couldn't read his magazine anyway. Something seems amiss here. You couple this with the fact that in 2023, there are 13 countries that ban the Bible itself, much less the other literature, a total of 17 that won't even allow Christianity in its borders, much less an encouraging Watchtower article from Stephen Lett and Mark Sanderson. But we are to believe this is the best way to communicate life and death matters with mankind. So if you're keeping score, you're the creator of the solar system, and you decide a publishing company in New York of the United States pumping out books describing how you're soon going to kill all non-Jehovah's Witnesses, much less non-Christians, is the best form of communication you can come up with? How effective is 40 billion books and magazines? I'm going to go on record as saying not very effective at all. The governing body better hope Jehovah's Witnesses are having a lot of hot sex, because that is where their next round of publishers is coming from. Babies born into that organization. Babies they will then hand the Bible stories book to. How effective is this? I say not effective at all. And aside from how ineffective printing billions of books and magazines is, I've always truly hated how they're written. Moving on to my second bizarre line of thinking. The publications of Jehovah's Witnesses feature some of the most juvenile writing style you will ever experience. And I'm not talking about the Bible stories book that's targeting kids. I'm talking about the stuff for adults. It's a subject for a whole episode on how they've dumbed down the entire organization. I say this with the utmost respect, at least attempt to, but the vast majority of what you find coming from Jehovah's chosen guys is roughly about a 3rd to 5th grade reading level. It's juvenile. It's filled with stuff that is meant to take you down a path that just isn't there. And then there is the intellectually insulting content in what they thought was the best way to communicate with mankind since the Bible wasn't enough. Consider the Awake magazine. It's a favorite. Look, would you like to hear how amazing this magazine is? This life-saving, all-critical publication is apparently needed to save billions of people and expound on Jehovah's more inferior book known as the Bible. But first, the Awake is changing people's lives. The Awake of 97, August 22nd, page 32, a treasure trove of knowledge is the title. Quote, we get an experience, and we all know we love those experiences and miss them, those non-corroborated experiences. Quote, a man who works with the news magazine of Lagos, Nigeria, wrote the branch office of Jehovah's Witnesses in that country and described Awake in the above terms. He explained, each time I read a copy of the Awake, I have the urge to write you. But often, when I was on the threshold of writing the letter, another equally good, in fact better, copy of the magazine would arrive and entrance me all over again. The bottom line of all of this Awake is, to my mind, a treasure trove of knowledge. I have rarely seen a publication so rich, so beautiful, so balanced, and so skillfully packaged. It is an invaluable gift to mankind. End quote. Wow. The Awake is indeed changing lives. From the Awake of 1999, February 22nd, page 32, and the aptly titled article, Helped in His Search, we get another experience. Quote, a woman stopped me on the street and offered me the Awake magazine. I didn't know what this magazine was about, but since it was attractive in appearance, I took it. When I came home, I looked at the articles and they caught my interest. I do not think of myself as a believer. However, in your publication, I found reliable answers to many questions that were disturbing me. End quote. Wow. Not the Bible, the Awake. These fine men aren't wrong, I might add. Aside from the fact that we're to believe Jehovah thinks this is the best way to communicate and that it's filled with the juvenile, we are told that it is a treasure trove. And look, as I do, I came prepared with some examples of the treasures you can find in the Awake magazine because the Bible isn't enough. Consider just a sampling of the hard-hitting journalism and guidance a desperate person can find in the Awake magazine at this very hour. I give you the Awake of 1971, November 8th, page 21 through 23. Under the hard-hitting article, A Friendly Dog. Is it safe? Quote, I'm going to try to get through this. As the number of dogs increases, so does their waste. A large dog will eliminate 1.25 pounds of feces a day, but the average for all dogs is about 0.75 pounds. That amounts to over 60,000 tons of solid waste a year from just New York City dogs. I wonder who wrote this. And that does not include millions of gallons of urine. Can these wastes cause disease? End quote. The Awake, hard-hitting, a treasure trove of knowledge and needed to explain the Bible. We are now discussing dog shit, where they piss, and odd that it was all in New York. I wonder where this came from. But how about one more? The Awake of 2001, April 8th, pages 28 and 29, under the very important article, Bad Breath and Job Prospects. Quote, it is no exaggeration to say that bad breath harms many careers, states dentist Ana Cristina Colby in the Brazilian magazine Exam. In extreme cases, adds executive headhunter and recruiter Leandro Credera, people lose one job after another without ever understanding what the real problem is. In a study carried out in 2 large Brazilian cities, 40% of people surveyed suffered from halitosis or bad breath. Among the most common causes were stress and a fiber-deficient diet. To alleviate symptoms, Dr. Colby recommends that sufferers take a few days vacation. and increase their consumption of vegetables. As an emergency short-term measure, employees with halitosis can gargle with a weak hydrogen peroxide and water solution. End quote. Jehovah, thank you. Thank you, governing body, the guys the Bible's about, for producing such hard-hitting, important information as this. I've got bad breath. My dog takes craps everywhere. What am I going to do about it? Oh, I see here I'm to take a vacation and eat more vegetables. From the throne of the heavens, ladies and gentlemen. They're all in the library. You can reference them. I gave you the dates and times. Imagine claiming that you represent the Creator, Jehovah God, and Jehovah and his Son want to be sure you have additional guidance on dogs taking dumps and the fact that you have bad breath and it's going to cause you to lose your job. Aren't you thankful? I mean, seriously, what was Jehovah thinking at 2 Timothy 3 when he said we were completely equipped and fully competent? People, he was kidding. He was kidding. He knew the Awake magazine was coming in the future, and he knew it would save lives, or at least save you, from scraping up dog shit and having to buy a lifetime supply of breath mints. I don't know. And to think all of these life-saving books and magazines can all be obtained for free. Let's move over there. These books, this hard-hitting information that's going to save your life, or at least save your job, they're for free. They're for free. But wait, for us old-timers, it wasn't always that way. For many of us, we grew up asking for a nickel or a dime. Do you remember those days? My 70s babies? I'm sure there has to be at least one person listening that remembers asking for money. Even saying this right now, I literally get a visceral physical reaction, because imagine being 10 years old. You roll up to a random stranger's door. You claim they can live forever in paradise. You show them the cover of the Watchtower and then look them in the eyes and say, I can tell you how to live forever, and I'll give you that information in this magazine if you cough up a dime, or how about a nickel? 10 years old. And I laugh at it, but you could tell I don't laugh as much because it literally was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. You're going to die. I can save you. Do you have a nickel or dime on you? I mean, incidentally, the Bible during this time period never makes an appearance at any door. It rarely came out of the book bag. Just the magazines. Just one of those 40 billion other pieces that made the Bible obsolete. And look, if we weren't cute little kids that they felt sorry for, I'm sure it would have hit them that we were literally selling salvation. And Jehovah thought their lives were worth a grand total of about 10 cents. No dime, no paradise. Like, what? What? That arrangement, as many of us will remember, went away due to new government laws and tax charges, despite what witnesses were told. Not because Jehovah suddenly thought he shouldn't be charging for this well-written, life-saving information that was needed to explain his original book, the Bible. No. The letter to the body of elders of February 21st, 1990, the day Jehovah suddenly decided to give away literature he said we never needed to begin with, it all became free because of government laws and tax charges. It's a subject for another show, but needless to say, few Jehovah's Witnesses know that we started giving away this hard-hitting journalism and information on dog crap and bad breath due to our buddy who we actually stuck up for, false religion, don't touch the unclean thing. His name was Jimmy Swaggart. He was losing a court case requiring taxes on all church literature. The witnesses jumped in to side with him, and we lost. Voila! Jehovah now gives away all of this life-saving information for free or for a small donation if you kind of want to. We'll talk more about that at another time, or see last week. But oh my God, as a kid, was that brutal. I don't want to be here. I hope my friend from school isn't behind that door. Oh, it's their mom. Hey, you're going to die. Isn't this a beautiful picture, eating apples with your koala bear? Give me a dime and I'll share it with you. Brutal. Brutal. But aside from all of that, there's something even more interesting when it comes to the mountain of books and magazines published by the Watchtower Bible Tract Society. If you're following along, we got a book Jehovah wrote saying that this is all you need, but then 18 centuries later said he needs a group of imperfect guys to write 40 billion more books and magazines, costing the same people that want to read these books and magazines millions of their own dollars in donations to get them. That's right. If you really sit and dwell on this, my dear friend Jehovah's Witness who may be listening or is doubting, you're giving them money so they can write more books and magazines that you are told you need to read, only to find out these same books and magazines, you're paying for them. Huh? Some people call that things like pyramid schemes and stuff, but I'll leave it alone. Just sit with this. Sit with all of it. It's one of my favorite subjects, if I'm being candid. But I want to move on to something that really fascinates me. And I think this might be for people who like to think beyond just the obvious. And I mean that respectfully, by the way. That just go a level deeper. The Jehovah's Witness in any congregation or that is associated is paying for this literature in most cases. Most people are not donating for this. Again, go look at a book cart. They're standing there handing them out. Who's paying for that? They are. But here's something that's really fascinating. Those 40 billion pieces of literature, those books, those magazines, guidance on what to do when your dog takes a dump, your bad breath, or even, hard-hitting things like blood transfusions, whatever it may be, those books and magazines that we are told our lives depend on studying are vanishing. They're disappearing. What? That's right. The information Jehovah had his guys write in books in, say, 1950 to save precious souls and lives in 1950, those books are all disappearing. And the same could be said with books in 1960, 1970, gone. 1980s, gone. Suddenly, Jehovah has decided he doesn't want you to read those books and magazines anymore. He doesn't want you to have access to them. Even if reading those very publications was the difference in you becoming a Jehovah's Witness and gaining the hope of living forever in paradise earth in the year you found the book or magazine. And that should fascinate everyone. As a young ministerial servant, I was actually assigned to oversee my congregation's Kingdom Hall library. That was a thing at one point. And man, was I pumped. I was so happy. For a kid that loved books, I was in heaven. I was in my early 20s. I got to personally build the library in our Kingdom Hall that I believed saved countless lives. I got to oversee the growth of the library by asking some of the older brothers and sisters for missing publications I'd only heard about but never held in my hand. I was so happy. I can't even tell you how cool that was to me. I grew our Kingdom Hall library, our congregation, by finding missing bound volumes, missing publications, the rainbow books, good old Judge Joe, going back to the 20s. I was so excited. I actually saw books in the 1910s. I couldn't have been more excited as a kid who grew up loving books. And I'll tell you, that singular act was critical in my life. Oversight of the library. Little did anyone know when they handed it to this 20-year-old ministerial servant that I loved to read. And assigning this guy to the Kingdom Hall Library was a mistake. As I said at the outset, I love books. And I got to hold those very books that explain the Bible that I grew up hearing about in my hand. And wouldn't you know it, I read them. Domino 1 was down. The rest was history. I was reading our literature. Big mistake. Since 2000, the year 2000, the Kingdom Hall libraries, by the way, they've been emptied. They've been emptied. There's been several letters to elders to destroy, literally destroy, or remove the older literature. Many, many publications have disappeared or were destroyed, particularly during the 1980s when I was a kid, and it got even worse post-2000, and it continues today with letters to the bodies of elders in congregations that include lists of publications approved for destruction. Let that sink in. You were alive in 1968. There was a bound volume, a book, a tract that changed your life. You can't even read it anymore. Why? In 2018, there was a list of books to be destroyed that included the New World Translation of the Christian Greek Scriptures. And yes, that means they threw away the words of Jesus himself for a more updated version. And it means they tossed Jehovah's claim at 2 Timothy 3. That's right. Jehovah and Jesus directed them to throw away what Jehovah originally said about being fully competent, completely equipped for a better, more updated guarantee that he obviously didn't mean, because 40 billion pieces of literature and stuff. They were throwing away copies of the Bible. In October 2020, the elders received a letter and a list of books to toss in the fire. A couple of favorites that greatly impacted my life as a Jehovah's Witness from kid to adult, and it just pains me to let you know that that year they received a list that included My Book of Bible Stories, all versions prior to 2004. That's right, folks. That includes the 1978 classic, Blood, Guts, and More, in full illustrations. If you have one, hold on to it. It included Revelation, its grand climax at hand, all versions prior to 2006. Incidentally, this version 2 is now gone in 2023. And this letter was in 2020. 3 years later, they're all gone, out of print. Oh, and then in this letter in October 2020 to the bodies of elders, it says this: please remove any book published before 1987. They have officially wiped out the library of my life as a Jehovah's Witness. It's gone. I got married in 87. It's gone. There's no easy way to say this. Not only was the Bible apparently wrong or dated, also not good enough, but now a Jehovah's Witness is faced with the reality that Jehovah's Bible study aids apparently ceased to be aids at some point, almost like a best if used by date, and he doesn't even want his people reading them, despite the fact that these very people might have studied this book and that's the reason they're a Jehovah's Witness. They're gone. Does that strike you as odd? I mean, he still allows us to look at the Bible, which includes a copy of things as old as the Ten Commandments in its pages, but he doesn't want you to see the 1976 youth book. Or how about even Judge Joe's epic book, Millions Now Living Will Never Die, despite the fact that Joe is sitting right next to him in heaven. Awkward. But the real question is why? And if you're a Jehovah's Witness or someone associated or curious, why aren't you asking why? These very publications were used in field service to conduct life-saving Bible studies and acquaint people with Jehovah himself. They were written under the direction of Holy Spirit. They were used to save lives. They were used in public meetings. At times, people actually gave their lives to save shipments of the Watchtower magazine. See the Holocaust. But now? Well, now they're not good enough anymore. And we don't even want you having a copy of them. Undoubtedly, after a lot of prayers, any third or fourth generation Jehovah's Witness wanting to see what their grandparents studied in order to preserve the family line into a world with koala bears and perfect skin are forced to skip the Kingdom Hall or the website and explore Jesus' new way of distributing that life-saving information that got your entire family tree to be Jehovah's Witnesses. That new way, well, it's called eBay. It's not in your local Kingdom Hall, but if you want to go on eBay, you might find Jesus' life-saving words. If you can't find a publication there, you can always explore a random used bookstore, or another one of my personal favorites, often stopped in during field service hours as we counted time, those things called garage sales. You'll often find some old pearls of wisdom from Jesus and his guys there. And look, there's only one question. Why? How can this be? We got the Bible, fully competent, nope. We got 40 billion pieces of literature that have saved lives throughout several generations, and I can't look at them anymore? Why? Look, I think it's obvious, don't you? Putting aside the insanity that ranges from pure comedy to deadly dangerous that you can find in these older publications, you simply can't make any more money off a book or a magazine that you've already placed with someone and they gave a donation for. You've hit the ceiling on how much money you can make. You now need another new book, a new magazine, a new article, so you can get another round of donations. Money. The answer to all of this, including the question why, is money. Old books already placed don't make new money. And Jesus and his guys in upstate New York love themselves some cash flow. If you want proof of this, the Kingdom Ministry, such a delightful publication only baptized people could have from your book study conductor, November 96, page 3 says, share with others according to their needs. And notice what a Jehovah's Witness learns from this article. Quote, the cost of literature that we placed in the field may be offset in part by donations to the Society's worldwide work offered by us at the Kingdom Hall and by interested ones who accept it. However, when it comes to literature items we request for our personal use, including songbooks, yearbooks, deluxe Bibles, and so forth, we cannot expect outsiders to care for our needs. These are all books a witness is told they must have or face an elders meeting or a shepherding call. Back to the quote, Jehovah's dedicated servants are the primary source of this financial support. With that in mind, many publishers estimate what these items might cost if commercially produced, and then they contribute accordingly. For example, a deluxe gold, I got to back up here for a minute. With that, it says, quote, with that in mind, after they've admitted that publishers are what make this engine go, this organization go, they then say, quote, with that in mind, many publishers estimate what these items might cost if commercially produced, and then they contribute accordingly. Very next sentence, quote, for example, wait a minute, I'm sorry. You just said that as a publisher, I can estimate in my own mind what this... No. Next sentence, quote, for example, a deluxe Gold Edge Bible can easily cost $20 or more. Ding, ding, ding. We have the mind game. They just told you that if you get a Bible at the literature counter, you better be slipping $20 or more into the contribution box. Back to the quote. A deluxe Bible can easily cost $20 or more. A reference book may be $40 and up. A full-color wall calendar may sell for at least $5. An encyclopedia on CD-ROM costs from $50 to $100 or higher. Music compact discs commonly cost close to $20, and some videos are often sold for much more. A failure to contribute enough to cover costs will ultimately restrict what the organization may otherwise be able to accomplish in furthering the worldwide work. End quote. Let me summarize in layman's terms. Dear Jehovah's Witness publisher, we like to create the illusion that you have free will and you can give from the heart. That's bullshit. We're going to tell you what each of these items cost. And if you don't put at least that much in, you, dear Jehovah's Witness publisher, are going to get people killed. Because we won't be able to produce this literature without your money. Therefore, we can't further the worldwide work. Therefore, by extension, people are going to die because you didn't bring the latest copy of the Awake magazine on dogs pooping and bad breath to their door. People are going to die. Hint, hint. Money. And those publications we were taught complement the Bible and explain Jehovah even better than apparently he could are now useless. You can't see any of them. We already got the money. We put those in the trash can now. We need some fresh stuff because, well, fresh stuff sells. Oh boy. Let's wrap this up. Going back to the beginning. I like books. And apparently so does Jehovah, by the way. 40 billion more. But I got to ask, and I'd love to see it, whether it's social media, YouTube, wherever it may be. Do you have a favorite? Is there a publication or article that stands out to you in your time as a Jehovah's Witness? This is so much fun to see what people put. Is there one that actually fed your doubts and helped you find the door, as if this subject into itself isn't doing that? But I've said enough. Long, rambling road. Thank you for walking with me. In conclusion, I'll just share this. One final thought. From the About Us section, currently featured on Jesus' website, you can find it for yourself, read it with your own eyes. We are told the following, quote, we now operate 15 printing facilities located in Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, and South America. End quote. It's also odd. Jehovah, Jesus, King Jesus, do you care to comment? 15 printing facilities, 40 billion pieces of literature, making your book obsolete. Do you care to comment? What? This just in, folks. This just in. Sorry. Looky there. It turns out Jehovah and Jesus do have a comment about 40 billion pieces of literature, 15 printing facilities on multiple continents. They do have a comment. Allow me to share it with you in real time. It's found in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 12 of the New World Translation of the Bible, the book Jehovah wrote. It says there, quote, to the making of many books there is no end, and much devotion to them is wearisome to the flesh. End quote. Never mind. That came from the Bible. And as we've learned in just this little hour, the Bible just isn't enough. My bad. I want to thank you all for listening. Wherever you may be well.